A honeybee has a brain smaller than a sesame seed. No ruler, no pencil, no concept of geometry. And yet it solves a mathematical problem so complex that human mathematicians debated it for centuries before finally confirming the answer. The hexagonal cell. Researchers discovered that bees build walls averaging just a tenth of a millimeter thick, with angles that stay remarkably consistent, achieving a shape that stores the maximum amount of honey using the minimum amount of wax. That's not luck. That's not accident. That is precision engineering from an animal that has never seen a blueprint in its life. And it raises a question that should genuinely unsettle you. How did something with no formal intelligence outthink us? Today we're looking at 14 animals whose construction abilities don't just rival human engineering. In some cases, they outright embarrass it. No calculations, no project managers, no safety inspections. And yet these creatures are building climate-controlled cities underground, spinning materials stronger than steel, and reshaping entire river systems with nothing but instinct and time. But here's the question running through all of it, the one we'll keep coming back to. What does it actually mean to engineer something if the engineer has no idea what engineering is? Hold on to that, because by the end of this, the answer might change how you think about intelligence itself. Let's start with something that seems simple, a spider web. You've probably walked through one, probably cursed at it, but consider what you actually just destroyed. An orb-weaving spider constructs a structure containing between 20,000 and 30,000 individual silk junctions, each one precisely placed, each one engineered with what researchers describe as strain-relieving anchors. Flexibility margins that allow the entire web to deform by up to 30% before anything actually breaks. Modern suspension bridge engineers use the same principle. They call it controlled deformation. The spider just calls it Tuesday, and the material holding it all together? Spider silk has a tensile strength ranging from 200 to 500 megapascals depending on the species, stronger than steel of equivalent diameter, comparable to Kevlar, produced at room temperature, from amino acids, by an animal that weighs less than a paperclip. We've been trying to synthesize this stuff in laboratories for decades. We're still not quite there. Now scale up. Way up. A termite mound can stand over 30 feet tall, built by insects that are essentially blind. But the construction itself isn't even the most impressive part. It's what happens inside. Researchers studying termite mounds found that internal temperatures are maintained between 28 and 32 degrees Celsius, even as the world outside swings between 5 and 40 degrees. That's a 40-degree ambient range held to roughly a 4-degree internal band. Passively, no electricity, no thermostat, no pumping system of any kind. The architecture itself does the work. Ventilation shafts channel airflow, and the soil's thermal mass absorbs and releases heat in a carefully balanced exchange. The result is a structure that breathes, stabilizes, and sustains an entire colony without a single active mechanism keeping it running. Engineers studying this design have since applied similar passive ventilation principles to human buildings. The termites figured it out first. By millions of years, the termites aren't maintaining that temperature for comfort. They're farming. Inside those mounds, termite colonies cultivate fungus as their primary food source. And that fungus has extremely specific environmental needs, which brings us to something even more deliberate: leafcutter ants. These insects maintain underground fungal gardens at between 24 and 26 degrees Celsius, with humidity held between 95 and 99%, managing temperature variation to within 2 degrees and humidity variation to within 5%. According to research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, these conditions are maintained with a consistency that would make modern controlled environment agriculture look unreliable. And here's the number that puts it in perspective. Leafcutter ants invented this kind of farming roughly 50 million years before humans discovered agriculture. The infrastructure they've built to sustain it, the tunnels, the chambers, the airflow systems, isn't accidental. It's the product of coevolution so tightly optimized it functions as a living factory. Underground, invisible, and running perfectly. Here's a materials engineering problem we're still trying to solve. How do you create a building material that is structurally sound, cheap to produce, and completely biodegradable, returning to the environment without leaving any trace of harm? Paper wasps solved this millions of years ago. They mix wood fiber pulp with saliva, working it into a paper-like material that is lightweight, strong enough for their structural needs, and fully biodegradable within 18 to 24 months of the nest being abandoned. We've been manufacturing paper since the 2nd century. We still can't make a structural building material that degrades that cleanly. The wasp nest doesn't just solve the construction problem, it solves the disposal problem too. That's what engineers call cradle-to-cradle design. It's considered cutting-edge thinking in sustainable architecture. The paper wasp has been doing it since before humans existed. But wasps at least have wood to work with. What happens when an animal builds a structure from nothing but its own body? The swiftlet, a small cave-dwelling bird, constructs its entire nest from hardened saliva. Not saliva mixed with anything, just saliva. Researchers have identified this biological adhesive as the fastest hardening of its kind ever discovered. It cures into a material hard enough to support the full weight of an adult bird and its chicks, clinging to vertical cave walls, exposed to wind, moisture, and the chaos of a shared nesting colony. No synthetic glue we've manufactured meets all those criteria simultaneously. Structural strength, adhesion to vertical rock, non-toxicity, biological compatibility, without significant trade-offs. The Swiftlet solution has zero trade-offs. It's been refined by millions of years of selection pressure, and it costs the bird nothing but time and saliva. Scale is a different kind of engineering challenge. Most animals build to their own size. Beavers build to the landscape. A single beaver colony, not a city, not a civilization, one family of animals, constructed the largest known beaver dam on Earth in northeastern Canada. Satellite imagery confirmed it spanning 2,790 feet, nearly half a mile of continuous dam, raising water levels by 6 to 12 feet across the surrounding terrain, creating wetlands, slowing runoff, filtering water, changing the hydrology of an entire regional watershed. We build water management infrastructure with cranes and concrete and engineering surveys. A beaver uses teeth, mud, and sticks. And what they create isn't just a dam, it's a keystone habitat. Other species move in. Fish populations shift. Bird communities change. The beaver doesn't know it's doing any of this. It's just building a home. But the engineering consequences ripple across the ecosystem for generations. And then there's the opposite of the beaver. Not dramatic, not fast, not visible in any single lifetime, but arguably the most consequential engineering in the history of life on Earth. Coral polyps build at a rate of 5 to 50 millimeters per year. That's a pace so slow that meaningful progress takes decades, centuries for anything substantial. And yet, according to the United States Geological Survey, coral reef structures house 25% of all marine species on Earth, despite occupying less than 0.1% of the ocean floor, a quarter of ocean life, in a fraction of a percent of the available space. The engineering efficiency of that, the density of ecological function packed into coral architecture, has no parallel in any human construction project. We build cities. Coral polyps build ecosystems. The distinction matters. A city serves its builders. An ecosystem serves every living thing that touches it. Most of the animals we've covered are working from pure instinct, a genetic program running automatically from birth. But some animals have added something else, something that looks uncomfortably close to education. The weaver bird builds one of the most structurally complex bird nests on Earth, a woven, chambered structure using 200 to 400 individual leaf strips with specific entrance designs that discourage predators. But a juvenile weaver bird doesn't know how to do this when it hatches. Researchers studying the species found that young birds spend 2 to 3 weeks in what can only be described as a genuine learning process, practicing, failing, disassembling their attempts, and trying again. They watch experienced adults. They copy techniques. They improve through repetition. That is cultural transmission of engineering knowledge. That is an apprenticeship. We didn't invent that concept. Weaver birds were already running it long before we built our first structure. Individual learning is remarkable, but collective engineering, where the structure emerges from the coordinated behavior of many individuals with no single brain directing the whole, that's something else entirely. Musk oxen demonstrate this in one of its most striking forms. When a predator is detected, a herd will form a defensive ring, calves protected at the center, adults facing outward. Within 1 to 2 seconds, not 1 to 2 minutes, seconds. In whiteout blizzard conditions where visibility is near zero, this coordinated structural response happens through auditory and tactile cues alone. No visual signals, no commands, no leader calling out positions. A perfectly functional defensive architecture emerges from the collective, almost instantaneously, in conditions that would disorient most humans within moments. That's not just impressive coordination. That's emergent engineering. Structure arising from the system itself, not from any individual directing it. And it raises the question we promised at the start. If the engineer doesn't know it's engineering, what exactly is engineering? Here's what connects every animal we've looked at today. Not intelligence, not intention, not conscious design. What connects them is something simpler and more profound. They solve the right problem. Completely. The spider didn't just build a trap. It built a trap that absorbs energy, distributes load, and repairs itself when partially damaged. The termite didn't just build a home. It built a passive environmental control system that rivals anything we've designed in the last century. The coral polyp didn't just build a skeleton. It built a three-dimensional city that supports a quarter of all ocean life, growing at a pace so patient that no single generation ever sees it complete, yet generation after generation adds to something that will stand for hundreds of years after them. That's the real lesson here. Human engineering is often about solving a problem fast, at scale, with available resources. Animal engineering is about solving a problem so completely, so perfectly matched to the actual requirements of survival, that it sustains life across millennia without maintenance, without updates, without anyone ever checking if it's still working. It just works. And maybe that's what engineering is supposed to be. Not the cleverest solution, the truest one, the one that's still standing long after the engineer's gone. So here's what I want to know from you. Which of these animals surprised you the most? And is there one we missed that deserves to be on this list? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. If you want to keep going down this rabbit hole, there's a video right here on the most extreme survival adaptations in the animal kingdom. Some of those cross over directly with the engineering we talked about today. The end screen is coming up. Take 30 seconds, check it out, and we'll see you in the next one.